Hi there, Coach Alexa here. I'm talking about caffeine today. So caffeine is a performance enhancing drug. In fact, way back it used to be on the banned list for elite level athletes until they, I guess fair enough, kind of realised that it's so ubiquitous in society across pretty much all cultures that it was a little bit unfair to not allow elite athletes to partake. So caffeine is most often found in drinks, so tea, coffee, Coca-Cola. It's found in some sports drinks and gels, as an added benefit to give you a bit of a boost. You can also find it in chocolate, so dark chocolate particularly, that's got a higher percentage of cocoa solids. It will have more caffeine in it as well. What does caffeine do? Essentially, it reduces our effort perception. So it gives our brain the perception that we're, putting less effort in for the same amount of speed, or maybe increasing our speed for the same amount of effort. It makes us feel like we're doing better than perhaps we are physically. So it acts very much on the brain. It does wake us up a little bit. So if you're running long distances, ultras, overnight races, it will help kind of overcome. The caffeine will keep you awake a little bit better, help you overcome the sort of hormonal sleep cycle that kicks in late in the night when you just want to go to sleep and stop running. It will have a performance enhancing effect. What I've found over the years though is that that performance enhancing effect and the impact of caffeine and whether or not you should be taking on caffeine as you run varies massively person to person. So for some of us, it can impact our bodies in other ways other than just that heightened performance. So it often, for most people, lifts their heart rate. So that can be good, or it can have a downside in terms of how we feel. For some people, it can make you feel a bit jittery. For some people, it can have an impact on their stomach and even their bowels. So as with anything, when you're trying to integrate this as part of a nutrition strategy, perhaps for a race or in your training, it's absolutely worth practicing it in training before you try caffeine out on race day. I'll give you a couple of examples then, I guess, because one of the biggest factors that determines how you will respond to caffeine in, for example, an energy gel, is how much caffeine you're used to drinking on a day-to-day basis. So a couple of examples there. The first one is me. I drink 1 cup of green tea a day with my breakfast, and that's it in terms of my caffeine intake. So green tea is about half as much, roughly half as much caffeine in as normal tea, and normal tea has about half as much caffeine in as a cup of coffee. So relatively low caffeine intake. So for me, because my caffeine threshold is really low, a cup of coffee is like a real shot in the arm. I can't have a cup of coffee and then just sit on the sofa. I've got to have a cup of coffee and then be doing things. It gets me in that sort of full of energy kind of, but slightly jittery energy for me kind of mode. So I use them very much as an emergency red button. So when I was doing ultras a few years back, maybe going overnight at that sort of 2-3 o'clock in the morning when the hormone build up in your brain is really making you want to go to sleep, that was a good time for a little bit of caffeine for me. Or maybe, if I'm really starting to flag or the wheels are coming off a little bit towards the end of a marathon, 4 miles from the end, I might have a caffeine gel just for that hit and to override a little bit of that perception of effort in my brain. I was, however, at the other end of the caffeine scale, working with a runner a few years ago, and we were kind of towards the first half of her marathon training plan. The long runs were getting up to maybe the 11 or 12 mile mark, and she was complaining of really, really bad headaches. So we looked a little bit at dehydration, energy levels. We looked a bit at, posture. Was it, the muscles in her neck supporting her head, which can happen on longer runs as they tire. But quite quickly we figured out it was because she was drinking 15 to 16 cups of coffee a day, just normally, and most of those were in the morning. So she'd maybe have a couple of cups of coffee before she went out for a long run. But by the time she got to sort of 90 minutes into her long run, her body would have normally had at least another 4 or 5 cups of coffee by that point. Quite a lot of coffee. And so she was effectively getting caffeine withdrawal. So it was impacting her, really badly. She felt awful, getting these headaches, felt really low on energy, and it was because her body was just used to so much caffeine coming in throughout the day, particularly in the morning, that when she wasn't getting that, she was getting those withdrawal symptoms. So for her, we came up with a caffeine gel strategy for her long runs and on race day, as well as a little bit of work to gradually drop the amount of coffee she was drinking. Once she realised exactly how much she was getting through in the day, she started to drop things just gradually of her own accord. But we came up with a caffeinated gel strategy that effectively mirrored the amount of caffeine she was getting or day to day that her body was used to and expecting. So for her, it wasn't about performance enhancement. We did think about, could we then add more to enhance performance, but because she was looking to drop her overall intake anyway at that point, we decided against it. We were just looking to match it. So what impact a 1 or 2 caffeine gels in a long run or towards in the second half of a marathon, for example, will have on you does just depend on our individual physiology, but it also very much depends on how used to caffeine we are, how much we drink of it day to day. And as with anything, like I said earlier, practice these things in your training runs, and it will really help you to figure out what the benefit is, and whether also the performance benefits outweigh the potential downsides around digestion, around that sort of jitteriness, that high heart rate. So give them a go. They're a good strategy, particularly for longer stuff. But yeah, experiment in training first.